Hello everyone, it's Rosemary with Good Journeys Tarot, and today we're going to continue talking about my study of the Tarot de Marseilles. I'm going to be sharing with you my keywords that I have condensed from many different books, websites, and even YouTube channels into my own. And I'll also share the shadow and the light side of those various keywords for our numbers. I'm going to be using the Tarot Noir for this. The reason that I chose to use the Tarot Noir for this particular video is because the cards are large and I think it'll be easier to see them. And also I wanted to show off my newest deck. It is out of print as far as I can tell. You can still find it. It's a little bit pricey. The guidebook is actually not going to be very helpful when you're looking at the pip cards. It does cover the major arcana, the aces, and the court cards. And at some point I'll probably Google Translate some of this to look at it further, because I only understand about 20 to 25% of the French that I read. So let's hop right in and let's look at my meanings that I've come up with as I've worked through Tarot on Earth. So here we have our aces, and in Tom Benjamin's book, Tarot on Earth, he talks about looking at several different sources and finding keywords, and then condensing to something that you can relate with, or that works for you, and then also looking at the light and shadow side of those cards. And so I looked at 9 different sources. One, I did look at his keywords. I also looked at Untold Tarot by Caitlin Matthews. I looked at Holistic Tarot by Benabel Wynn, and I also looked at some websites like Biddy Tarot, and I looked at a video by Kelly Fitzgerald, as well as one of her PDFs that she did of meanings. I looked at also a video, which was probably the most helpful thing that I did, by Wolf of Coins, in which she talks about the cards as related to the major arcana, which is an idea from a book which I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, but I will post her video below so that you can go check out that video and find out the book that she got that from. So aces, obviously, those are beginnings and inspiration. You know, at the start of our journey into this element, and so it can be a very positive thing. You know, there's a lot of potential here, but then the reverse is true, is that you could waste your potential, which would be the shadow side of the aces. The twos, for me, basically boiled down to duality. And so whether it's 2 ideas or 2 emotions coming together, or whatever the case may be, that duality comes into play. Whether you're talking about balancing something or you're talking about making choices, it's really all about duality. And so for me, the positive part of that is an equality, where our duality reaches a consensus. And then the opposite of that would be an inequality, where our duality is in conflict, so that perhaps we're not making choices or we're failing to make choices, that kind of thing. Threes. So for me, basically threes are going to be about growth and expansion. And so the opposite of that, or that shadow side of that, would be being stagnant, not having any growth, opportunity, as it were. Now, in a future video, we'll be looking at the elements, but for now, I just want to talk about my meanings that I came up with as I worked through this process. So 4s are about stability, and that's something we definitely see within the Emperor, which is number 4 in the major arcana. And it also can be about structure. And so the light side of this is obviously that stability, but then the shadow side is becoming rigid and, not wanting to change. So fives are for me about disruption, and disruption can be both a positive or a negative thing. Disruption can lead to improvements in our life, and it also, however, can lead to, if we're not flexible and willing to adapt, lead to conflict and disarray in our life, as it were. So for me, sixes are about harmony. And, it can be harmony of thought, harmony of our emotions. That definitely comes into play in our Lover's card, which is our card 6. And you'll see this portrayed pretty well in the RWS, in your Pentacles, your Cups, and even your Wands, where that balance of your emotions leads you to being charitable, giving, nostalgic, and then in the Pentacles, also that whole being at one with the rest of the world by giving to them, and then in the Wands, we're going for our goals here, and we're going to achieve, if we're actually have a balanced approach, we're going to achieve that victory. So, and that's the only correlation I'm going to make to the RWS talking about this today, but that just really hit me, as how the harmony is presented in those 3 cards. The opposite of harmony, or at least the shadow side, is going to be being self-involved. I mean, if we were to focus only on our emotions, we wouldn't be concerned about others. And if we were only focusing on what we have, we wouldn't be giving to others. If we focus only on ourselves, we're not going to achieve the goals that we have in life. The 7s were probably the hardest for me to come up a meaning for, because they varied so greatly in the various sources that I looked at. But ultimately, I decided that it was about reflection. And, reflection can be a good thing in our life. Like when we look at a situation and we assess it to improve ourselves. But there's also the possibility that we become obsessed with these things, rather than trying to look at them as an opportunity for improvement or advancement. And the other possibility is that we would be disinterested, rather than looking at this as an opportunity for assessment and improvement in our life. So 8s, this is one where it became apparent that some people, when they look at their numerological meanings, they've pulled those from their RWS cards or their RWS meanings. So like they would look at this and they would say, this is about, apprenticeship, or this is about, mastery of, a skill or whatnot, say if we were talking about the Pentacles. Well, I tried my best not to think in terms of the RWS when I went through this process. And for me, the key words that really came out for the 8s was accomplishment, or fulfilling a process, basically. And so if we think about it in those terms, we get this idea that it's about commitment, or the reverse would be an obsession with these things. And so it makes a big difference when you're doing this numerological process if you put out your idea about the RWS and think in terms of all of the cards numerologically. Again, some of the ones that I looked at, especially the eights, tended to be, they'd have 3 or 4 keywords, and there'll be a keyword for each of these suits in the RWS rather than a keyword that was specific to the eights, like mine, which is commitment to success. So the nines, for me, ended up being about nearing completion, about the rewards or the consequences of our work so far, basically. And so as we look at that as light and shadow, as we're coming to nearly completing a process, we're either going to see the benefit or we're going to see the disappointments for where we may have failed. But it's not so much about success or failure as it is about achievement versus, what was unachieved to me. So the 10s are basically the fulfillment or completion of our suits. And so we're going to see here, more so than in the 9s, whether we are successful or we have failed. And there's also this idea that when we hit 10, that either we have completed a process or we now have an excess of something. And so for the light and the shadow, what my thought was, success versus excess. And I know there's rhymes, but that's alliteration, I guess, there. Because either we have achieved what we were going for, or we now have an overwhelming supply of something we don't really need in our lives. Those are my initial thoughts on the numbers as I've gone through the process of looking at them. Again, I can't recommend enough Wolf of Coins video on this, and she does walk through all of the major arcana from 1 through 10 and relates them through the numbers, and that really helped me connect my meanings, because I struggled for a while with my 2s and my 6s being very similar in concept. And that was one of the things that, Tom Benjamin said, as you go through this process and you start adding in the elements and whatnot, you want to make sure that you have clear meanings for each of the 10 numbers so that they don't overlap. And that's where I struggled initially until I saw the Wolf of Coins video relating them to the major arcana, which then helped me work out that similarity between my 2s and 6s, because to me they were both about balance at one point, and I'm like, well, that can't be right, because they can't both be about balance. One has to be about something different than the other. So please feel free to share your thoughts on the numerology in the minor arcana in regards to the Tarot de Marseilles, or your thoughts about this deck that you've been looking at today, which is, again, the Tarot Noir. And it is by Justine Turnell and Matthew Hakiri, I think is how that's said. Next time, we will be looking at how I have integrated the elemental aspects of the cards to my meaning. So we have, for example, our 10 of Cups, which is related to water. So I'll be relating now my 10 meaning, which is completion, success, or on the shadow side, excess, to the water element and its key meanings. I hope that you're getting something out of this video and that you're enjoying following along with me as I learn the Tarot de Marseilles. If you have thoughts or input, please do share it. Please do subscribe to my channel. And until next time, good journeys.